Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pat McConnell with Allen Heath. Happy to be here this afternoon with the folks at TC Furlong doing this fabulous event. Shawn, why don't you come on into the shot here and join me? Say hello. With my good friend Shawn McLoughlin from AudioBiz.
How's it going, guys? We're coming to you live from TC Furlong, one of our partners with AudioBiz and Allen Heath here in Chicagoland. Thank you all for joining in on this presentation. We're going to be going through the console, and we will be doing another broadcast or another session in about an hour. But if you've got questions, type them in the chat window, and we'll do our best to jump in and respond to them. So with that, I'm going to let Johnny Sparkle here, a.k.a. Pat McConnell, take it away.
All right, and thanks for being our technician for this. Hey, everybody, in these times, as it is today, thank you for attending. This was originally scheduled so that we could have a live get-together with the folks here at TC and then also all the guests and customers. What's fabulous is we've got hundreds and hundreds of people who have signed up for our impromptu web series here. So this is probably not the fanciest web presentation you've seen, but we're throwing it together right here in the foyer at TC's facility. Shawn has been a phenomenal technician for me in the last minute to throw up some lights and cameras. So just to tell you what we hope to tell you today, we're going to start. We're going to spend about, I think, probably about a half hour, 45 minutes talking about the Avantis console, the Avantis or Avantis, whatever you like to call it. Either one is fine. And then we'll take questions as things go. I'm going to give you a quick overview. I know that we've got some preemptive questions that folks had sent in. Hey, will you run down this rabbit hole for me? Can we dive super deep on this? We'll cover as much as we can in the short overview. If you did not get your question answered, by all means, we're happy to reach out to you. And as things are, the phrase that I've learned how to use is for right now. Since we're limited to some of our get-togethers in time and space and number of people, we're doing a lot of web work from Allen Heath, both from the factory in the UK and from the US team here, and our reps and customers and our dealers like TC Furlong. So if you'd like to, right now we're a great resource, and we will reach back to you with more additional information if you didn't get everything answered today. So as we talk about the Avantis console, Shawn, I'd like to jump over to the side of the console if that's okay. We've got a couple cameras set up today, and like I said, this is impromptu and a little unrehearsed, but our Avantis console has been a phenomenal reception in the marketplace. This is the next in the series of the Allen Heath mixers that are cutting edge in the industry right now, designed as a 24-bit 96 kilohertz system using our Everything I/O ecosystem. And this is the middle section now of what we've originally designed as our XCVI core powered FPGA mix offerings. It started for us with D-Live series product. And we'll talk a little bit about that because that's the technology that we've borrowed from, and it trickles all the way down to our SQ series product. So I have an Avantis today. This is my fourth session on an Avantis. These are still, while they're beginning to ship well now, I still have yet to receive my regional sample. So I'm working through it. It'll be a fun day for me to make sure that I know what I'm talking about and finding my way on my own console and product. And to talk a little bit about where this comes from for us, a few years ago with the D-Live series of product, which is our flagship if you're not familiar, Allen Heath took a very significant differentiated leap forward in that we created an FPGA mix engine. And what we had done at that time is realize that DSP chip technology wasn't going to continue to further us in the way that we hoped for an advantage position in the marketplace. We wrote and created our own FPGA, and that acronym stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. It's basically a computer processor. And in the D-Live system, we created a 36-core processor that does an amazing job at creating higher quality audio than we were ever capable of doing so at any point before. It's all 24-bit, it's 96 kilohertz in our system, and we've got some significant advantages that the FPGAs provide, like faster throughput. We're at 0.7 of 1 millisecond full throughput. That's an industry-leading position for us. We started with D-Live, and we've trickled down with that technology into the Avantis, which is a very, very similar. But last year at this time, we released, a little earlier than that, we released the SQ series product, which it, again, is a lower price point mixer, but an FPGA in that is a processor as well. So we've built these FPGA powered masterpieces. And we've brought them to market, and our customers have received them in a tremendous way. We're gaining market share, and we're just trying to serve people doing what we do with mixing consoles. Allen Heath is an organization that's been around 50 years this year, and we're using what I think is a differentiated leap forward in how that fits for the technology for the industry. So as it goes, D-Live is still our flagship. In addition to the flagship, the next series is Avantis, and SQ is below that. We've filled this middle section with one model, no variations on the theme, very easy and very simple. And this works with everything else that we've created in our ecosystem. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. The Avantis itself has some unique offerings that we've come out with that are new for us with Allen Heath. In addition to an FPGA heart in the engine, this one has actually got a new chassis that is actually a cast aluminum frame that is almost a tubular exoskeleton. And forgive me, with just a couple of camera shots, we're a little bit limited, but I might be able to reference a couple of things in a quick slide. Shawn, do you have anything that you can pull up for us if I pull up a side shot of this? So can you get to that one for me? All right, great. We've got it. You can see a side shot of it. Now, these are glamour shots, of course. We've got a great marketing team. But what you see is the tubular exoskeleton that's on the side of the console itself. It gives you an idea of how it's constructed. And the rigidity that we've done in this die-cast aluminum chassis, this is the first time for us. And in doing so, we've created this incredibly rigid, rock-solid console chassis with very, very little movement or flexibility. Different than what we've done before in design, and it's done with the unique solution that we've, for the first time, put a couple of large 1080 touchscreens on the desk, so we don't want that to flex in any way. Probably the most rigid design for us to date in this chassis size format. So that's something that's new and unique for us. Kind of a fun little trivia note. I've learned at NAMM this year that the head of our mech engineering team in the UK is actually a former British tank commander, right? So you'll hear me reference a couple of things in reference to Allen Heath, located in Penryn in Cornwall. That's our headquarters worldwide. And while I poke a little fun at the Brits, I don't have a great Brit accent. I wish I did. I do drive a Mini, and I own a Triumph motorcycle. But that's as far as I get from the U.S. here. But having that tank commander at the head of our mech team, our guys are also a little bit crazy about superbikes. So if you look at the side of that console, it looks a lot like a Ducati frame, right? So the form factors are somewhat different in what we've done in Avantis. So if we talk about that, there's some terminology that we'll use in that. And as I said, it could be Avantis or it can be Avantis. Whatever you think is local for you. I like to think that it's Avantis. I mean, it is a Brit company. I like to think that my homeboys are a little bit more like James Bond than I am, and it's shaken, not stirred, right? So I call it an Avantis, but you call it what you like. The form factor, and one of the terms that the home office had come up with us, was designed into this new exoskeleton. We've added a bunch of great features, and we've also put a new term on it called a continuity UI. Okay. Now, I've made the joke before that I will now retract in these times that I thought it was a medical procedure, but it's not. What we talk about is what that experience is for the user and this new control interface that we've built into it, being able to use the touch screens. So that's something fun and unique. I'll set a couple of things up here real quick. If we dive into some of that in the form factor, if I talk tech a little bit, the Avantis is a 64 input by 42 output bus mixing system. And I say system because there are some local inputs on the back, and I'll show you a shot of that in a bit. But this is designed to work with the FPGA heart of the engine itself is in the console. Our D-Live products have always put that in the engine box, which is the I/O that we use, and then our console, or what most people look at as the console, as a surface. This is one unique offering. The heart of the engine is inside of it, and it works with what we call our Everything I/O interface system. So if you went out while you're online and you want to hit the Allen Heath website and go to products and you hit Everything I/O, it will show you all of the, what I call the Gazinta and the Gazauta boxes that we manufacture. Every one of those that we have manufactured, whether it's legacy product or our new cutting edge product, all work with the Avantis. Those connect via our S-Link port, and that is a connection that is over a standard shielded, note I did say shielded, right? With shielded connectors, Cat 5e or Cat 6 or better cable, and standard Ethernet protocol, so 100 meters or 330 feet for connectivity. We can talk tech about additional connections and some fancier stuff, but I'll cover the console first, and we'll leave some of that for questions at the end. So this system, as it is, working with the desk itself, for connectivity gives you local input at the desk, gives you control, and then also on the back of the I/O gives you connectivity for whatever it is that you might want to add in addition to remote boxes. So Shawn, if it's possible, can we flip to the back of the console real quick?
Sure.
Are we there? All right, thank you. Using a product shot is easier than turning around or trying to pop another camera behind this. So the rear of the console itself shows you the 12 XLR inputs and outputs. There's some AES inputs and outputs on it. The S-Link for connectivity, network connectivity, which is separate from our S-Link, and we can talk about that for uses in protocol. And then in addition to that, we have two of what we call the audio networking I/O slots, or card slots as they are, I/O port 1 and 2. Those are designed to house any of the cards that we currently offer for the D-Live series, and I can show you a couple of examples of what that stuff would look like as well. So there's also word clock on it for you guys that are really geeky or end up in Video Village having to use this and sync to somebody else's command or signal, so that's good for you too. As we look for those I/O expansion, that's just another way for us to get in and out of the desk. And if we use cards for that type of thing, the next card, the slots that I've got here is a little bit closer shot of that. And then we have, 6 of the most popular cards that we have currently are obviously Dante is very popular in our entire industry. At least we can all wave that flag for one mechanism. Our own protocols are GigaAce. Okay, and our GigaAce is the most robust mechanism that's out there. While we do play well with others, as you can see, I still enjoy working with our GigaAce product as our primary source. We do GigaAce for connectivity over category cable, and we also do what we call a FiberAce card, which is that same protocol that could be run over fiber as well. We manufacture a MADI card, and then also I'm using Waves protocol. Just as an example for fun, in the back of the console I have that I'm working with today, Shawn had popped a Dante card in there, and we've shown, or as I've got in the slide here, I've got a Waves card as well. So Shawn, you can jump back for us. Thank you very much. The Waves protocol is what I'm using with TracksLive to use some as a source just for some virtual playback tracks to make lights dance as we have it today. These were from a concert that a buddy of mine recorded in Nebraska. So if John's on the call, thank you for these tracks because we're using them today. If I talk about next what we'd normally do in setting up or utilizing the console for the first time. So you're going to walk up to it. You're going to see beautiful lights. You're going to see two 15.6-inch fully high-def 1080p touch screens. And it's the first time that we've actually deployed multiple screens of this size in any console. We have some D-Live product that has 2 touch screens, but as you can see, these are a little bit different. The interface itself, as part of the continuity UI, we now utilize the screen for more interaction with what we want to get to on the desk. So while the learning curve isn't steep, you'll look at it and go, okay, hey, this is something that's new for me. I've adapted pretty well to it, and frankly, I'm not necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer. I do have a fabulous gig with an incredible manufacturer, but my background is music and production. I found my way around it without the instruction manual because they ship it to us without it, or before it's yet complete, shall I say. All the documentation, if you guys should need it, is all online. But as I've set this console up, I've got the left side is currently one screen where I've set up typically for your regular I/O. That would be 6 layers that I've got here that you can see, and I've got laid out in different ways. The right-hand side of the console, which has traditionally been kind of like, hey, this is where I want to have my master section, or I want my DCAs, and I want my left-right, my output for my sub and all that. So I've mimicked that. I have my reverb sends and returns for the masters. I have my aux sends if I had to mix monitors from the front-of-house position or some things of that nature. That's on what I've set up for the right side. This is not how you need to set it up, simply what's most familiar to most people, so I go out and do and show tell that way. If we go into a menu where we actually have setup, and for grins, Shawn, I'd like to, can you bring up, well, you tell me because you've got the preview monitor. if we use the far shot, does that show both sides of the console well enough that I can
Yes.
show a couple menus? Okay, great. Then let's try that. And I'll just work from this side. We don't need the overhead yet. One of the things that I'm learning is as we're doing webinars, lighting is fairly particular, and we're in a room with a lot of ambient lighting, even from this, as it is, gray Chicago day. Are you guys trying to mimic London? Was that the deal? Okay, cool. Thanks. The idea is here that I can show you what I've got, and then we can close in on it if we need to. You'll see some reflection because we didn't dim the ambient light. But what we've got on the left-hand side, if I went in and I was going to set up, I will hit the setup menu on the left-hand side, and I will configure this. Let me jump out of that screen view and go to strip assign, and I'll go to configuration. So this, much like a DLive, if you guys have worked in DLive before, gives you your output bus configuration. You power the console up and you want to configure out whatever that it's going to be. So 42 total output buses, and you can select whatever those would be set as. So in this first submenu that I would choose, I've chosen left-right. You could do LCR, or you could do a left-right monosum, or whatever else it is you think is best. That uses the first of your 42 buses of allocation, right? So there's 2 buses that I've used. And then within this, whether you can see it or not, I've got a list for either mono or stereo groups, effects, auxes, matrices, and PAFL, because you can now run multiple PAFL buses on this, and multiples on DLive as well. So the idea, if I go to this and I go into groups for a section, I had programmed in, I want 2 stereo groups. I want to do a drum smash group and something else crazy that Shawn's going to come up with. I don't know what that is yet. For effects, I decided that I want to use 8 internal effects engines. I can have up to 12, but I've assigned in 8. That's twice as many as most people should ever use. And then I say that with a smile on my face. In the AUG section, if I was going to use this with a church that I volunteer with, I would use 4 AUX, mono AUX sends. That would be for wedge monitors if we needed to do that. And then we have 8 stereo sends that we'd want for ears, and we do that in the AUX section. 2 mono matrices and 2 stereo matrices. Now, if I hit apply, if I was going to make a change, and if I go into here, if I make a change and use the knob button here, it will tell me apply or cancel. It tells me I don't have any more mixes remaining. I could hit apply. If you do this, it will interrupt audio flow. So you do this at setup. You don't do this in show. We can do all kinds of changes, completely change layouts. I'll show you in what we would have in scene selection. And that can be recalls of snapshots, as some people recognize that term. And that does not interrupt audio. But reprogramming the FPGA and deciding what our bus outputs are will momentarily. Don't do that in show. I've warned you, thanks. In addition to that, after we can configure it there, we can decide where we want to set things up. I'll jump back into setup, and I can go into control configuration, and I now have strip assignments. I have these laid out as I wish, but if I were to grab something that was a blank slate and I want to drag and drop some things in, as some of you have worked with us, kick drum is on 1, right? That was written in Genesis somewhere. If I decided that's not how I want it, I'll take it off, and we say the ever important bass guitar is now channel 1, and we can run kick after it if you wish. You can lay this out granularly in whatever way you want, and I could grab a block of selections as I wish as well. So if I hit block select and I grab these channels, I can drag those into a blank space. I could use a spacer, or I can then overwrite what was on the previous setting as well. So that works for inputs, mixes, DCAs, and any of the other control that you'd want to have. So whether it's groups or, and when I say mixes, that could be aux mixes, it can be groups, whatever we'd have set up. Your effects, sends, and masters, your returns are there, and all of that can lay out in any way that you want. So the idea is to build the workflow to fit what you need, as opposed to having to make the form factor be the deciding mechanism for you. So easy, simple stuff. There's a lot here. I won't go through every menu at this time, but we can always circle back if we have time. There's something unique and new about this one. And Shawn, if we can see this in the top shot here, as you can see, if I'm in the top layer, I have, on whether you can see the details or not, I put a couple of matrices, and I put a subsend, and on my left, right here on these faders for my master section. The rest are DCAs that I've programmed in the top layer. Now, I have 4 highlighted channel strips that I have just painted onto the chassis there, or silk screen. Forgive me, I'm not sure which that is. Our pros can verify that for me online, and I'll tell you later. But the idea, if I jump into this setup, I can lock the master strips. And what we've done is we've said, well, most people want to have some either master control or key talent or whatever it would be that they always want to remain in the layout. And now I could just drag those into the top layer if I wish. And if I change layers, those remain while the rest of my 8 channels will change. Okay, so I can enable or disable that, and it would go to be whatever I want to lay it out as. So that's something that's unique to Avantis. I think it's a fun, cool little utilization. This is programmability for some of the other stuff that we've got. I've programmed a bunch of soft keys on the desk that we can talk about. There are some surface preferences here, dimmer and lighting that we've got for this. DCA spills are included, and then there's some rotary functions that are called custom rotaries as well. So audio settings are that, as we've got 2 layers of menu across the top. The left-hand side of the screen always has the standard menu layouts, and those will be as we go down on bank, processing, routing, I/O, ganging, meters, FX, scenes, setup, and utility. So I can jump into and out of that. I'm just closing these out by tapping on the screen. You'll see a little flashing VS that's an orange dot at the top. That is because I'm using the virtual sound check function to include playback, and that tells me, hey, you're in virtual sound check mode, so you couldn't accidentally mix the band's tracks instead of forgetting to turn it off and actually mixing the band. So that's humor. So if we talk about it in the way we'd set it up, we've laid out a console the way that we like it to be. We've got everything put where we want on the left side or the right side. You can work from either screen for either of that functionality. So as I was on the left side for setup, I still have the same screen and same functionality from this side if I wish to do it. Some things will work identically and some will work independently. Example being, if I go into select a button here or select a channel strip and I jump in and I want to play with a gate on something, the gate will show up on the channel that I'm working from this side. But if I wish, I can go over and I can select my main output. And if I want to, I can jump in and I can grab my parametric EQ or I could grab my graphic EQ. And both of these screens will work simultaneously, but work on different specifics for what they're laid out for. The other thing that's nice about it is there are times that you don't want to have 2 people firing commands as on a scene recall, let's say as an example. My scenes will track together if I do that identically. So whichever side I want to work from, I could choose it and fire it from this side or open it and fire it from that side. So there's a lot of versatility built into this in new ways for us, and I think as people will use it and grow into it. Both sides of the desk can operate independently. If people are in a scenario where, maybe I've done some volunteer work with schools or community theater where I'm helping teach a bunch of kids, and we might put somebody in charge of the head mics for a theater production, and then we'd have somebody else working on the other side of the mixer or a certain number of channels that could be mixing the orchestra as an example. But you can come up with your uses in those applications as you wish. So, next step towards designing our system, or how do we utilize it, we've laid all of that out. I would normally go in and say, hey, I need to get to my gazintas and my gazautas, right? So I tease my my Brit leaders in a great way when I say, that's not patching, right? Because that's what I grew up thinking that was patching. It's not, okay? There is no patching. What we have is input and output. So I go to the I/O section, okay? And as you can see, I have selected the virtual sound card, virtual sound check, and I'm using that with the waves tracks to give me my input that I've got laid out and bouncing around, making lights happen. Now, I could disable that if I wish. That's a one-button feature, by the way. I can inactivate that. Now, our lights have stopped, but I can show you a few things. If we go across, if I jump into and out of this, I'm in the I/O section, and across the top, I have inputs, outputs, tie lines, and virtual sound checks for my option. So if I go in and I choose inputs, this is...
Sorry.
Yeah.
To the other screen.
Oh, you got it, man. I will.
Doing okay.
You got it. All right, so if I go into I/O on this screen, because we can work from either one. This one has a camera above it. I hope it's a little easier for you to see. So if I go to inputs on this side, this will show me what I've got available here. Local inputs, note I only have 14 inputs. because it's local. If I go to the next tab here where it says I/O port 1, that would be my slot card as the example that I'm using, and that could be from Waves or from Dante if I've got those two cards in here in I/O port 1 and 2. I can actually pinch this down, and if you go all the way to the side, and it's too small for you guys to verify, but you're going to trust me on it, 128 channels of input. On our I/O slots, we've got 128 channels of input, or if I went to the output section and went to port 1, I have 128 channels there as well. And you can set that up for whatever you'd need it to be. So I/O port I/O 1 or 2, and then we can see that. In addition to that, I have S-Link, which is the connectivity for what I've got plugged into the back of this for any of our remote boxes that we would have. And as you can see on this one, if it's visible, make it a little bit bigger, I've got some things assigned, but they're not showing up. They're in a black and white, like a little zebra section. That's because I don't have anything connected currently to my S-Link. If you don't have it connected, it'll give you that sign. If it goes solid white, then you know you're great. This allows you to go through and you can pre-patch or set shows up ahead of time. And then as you bring them up, you'll know, hey, you forgot to patch this, or you need to add a box if you want to have all of that capability from last show, whatever that looks like. There's also USB connectivity and routing on here as well. There's a USB port on the front of the desk and on the rear of the desk. That is for multiple functionality, and that you can record to or play back 2 tracks. Internally, it will record 2496 WAV files only, or playback 2496 WAV files only. And that's also that USB connection is also the mechanism for file storage for shows and transfer. So that's basically outputs or inputs. And then we put another page on here that's unique, in that we have tie lines. And what that would allow me to do as an example. Now, we have these slots that are 128 in and out, even though it's a 64 channel mixer. So if we talk about what that looks like, 64 channels is what we're going to mix in that moment. That's the maximum. That's the largest that this desk will do. If you need to go bigger, go D-Live. It's easy. But that's a lot of market for a really, really low price point at a big boy level console. What we can do, though, is we can have an infrastructure inside of, as an example, a gymnatorium or an installation or a festival event, where maybe you want to drop a bunch of boxes throughout a facility or at an event, and you want to be able to see more than 64 channels at once, but you're only going to mix 64. You could pick and choose what you want from each one of the boxes that are connected, or from a Dante card that might be connected to infrastructure for other components or other parts of a system. The Waves connectivity will support larger, and it will also allow you to do what we call tie lines. If somebody came in and said, hey, I'm going to feed you 128 channels at Dante, you can pull what you want for the mix, but I need you to do me a favor. I want you to send a bunch of stuff out Maddie to a broadcast truck, but I want these channels out of what I'm sending you. It doesn't even have to be routed to your console. You can simply go into tie lines, and if you choose I/O port 1 on your input side and I/O port 2 on the output side and tie lines, I can literally patch and tie all 128 channels together if I want to. So think of it as a digital version of an old school patch bay for 128 gazintas and gazaltas. So as I said, that's I/O, and that's something I've learned from my Brit brethren. We don't patch, we have input and output. So useful, you set it up however you need it to be, and there's multiple settings for how we can do patching. Currently, I have it, if I show like an example of, I'll grab something on inputs, I'll make this a little bit larger, go to something I'm not using currently, and I have it so I have to have a 2-step verification because I'm kind of a klutz. I have a tendency to tap the screen when I'm talking all the time. I don't want to accidentally patch something or unpatch it. So I have a preference set up. If I go into options in this corner and that turns the screen blue, this is available for lots and lots of features on the Avantis and on the D-Live for that matter. That's where we borrowed the idea from. So if I tap on that, this will say, hey, what do I want? Do I actually want confirmation when I'm reassigning something? Do I only want the patch to work when the patch button is pressed? That is my best friend. Use full screen for input and output patching. I currently have multiple output tabs on. I realize that as I'm poking it. I prefer that to be off, actually. So I'm going to set that way, and I can jump back out of this. If I go in now, if I said I was going to patch something like I said I would, I could patch some local stuff into channels 40, and I'm going to take a couple inputs. In the lower left, I have a patch button, and I can do whatever I want. If I want to be cool and draw the line like you guys already know how to do, we can easily do that. So that's all my input patch. This does require verification. You don't have to set it up that way. You kind of know about that now. So that's a lot about the I/O section, but that's everything that we would normally do for connectivity and how do we get stuff into the console now. So we can route it there in the I/O patch, or if we were to close out of this, if I jump back out of I/O and let's go to bank or processing, bank is my overview. It shows me everything that's here. So in that layer, and as I change layers in the console, you can see that I've got these on the input sides currently. And Shawn, I'll work from this side. I've gone ahead and I've recreated my right-hand screen for a close-up as well, so that if you wanted to see what that would look like, now I'm just going to jump to another layer. It'll allow me to do that. So, excuse me. With my layouts here now for channels and some of the functionality I have, I could also jump into the processing window, which is here, or jump directly into the preamp. And this will give me assignability. This is telling me my source select is from the S-Link, or I'm using preamp on surface if I choose to do so. This is blocked out, so I'm not using, I am currently not using input 1. I've assigned this in only to virtual sound check, which, by the way, I'm going to reactivate now. So if I go to I/O, I go to virtual sound check, and I hit this button. Now we've got blinky lights at our inputs again. So as I jump back out, I go to processing. That's another section that we can work on. This will give you preamp on surface. If I want to actually add a model or something to that, if I want a tube stage preamp, I can recall that. That's part of the effects upgrade that we offer. The D-Pack is what we've called it. And that offers our deep processing plugins that we've become famous for. We create our own varsity level plugins for the D-Live product, and many of those are available for Avantis. Not everything that's in the D-Live is available for Avantis, and not quite as many, but in these days of people talking about how many effects engines that they run, we don't really call them effects engines, but you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of places to run models and effects if you wish. If you want to dive deeper on that, I think that's a good follow-up. We'll maybe do another webinar with just effects plugins sometime. Anyway, this is my preamp section as I jump through this, but the idea is to give you what the visuals are working with this fabulous touchscreen now. So this is my overview, my bank. I have processing, which gives me those individuals, and then each one of these will give me a tab across the top that I can work with. So that'll be preamp, my filters, both a high and a low pass filter on whatever that would look like for that individual I/O, my gate section. Every input that we have for all 64 has its own dedicated gate. We've got an insert after that. We've got a 4-band parametric EQ, and a compressor on every input. Now, this is the part where it's just built into our I/O. Some people will call this an effects engine. It doesn't require it. But if you do wish to, if I want to jump into the compressor and I want to grab something that might look familiar as a fabulous vintage style compressor, I can run that in my compressor slot. If you buy the Avantis without the effects upgrade, it still comes with everything that you need, and it comes with 2 different models. We have a peak and an RMS style compressor that we have as selectable function in the stock version that sound gorgeous, and frankly, I use those all the time. To me, they are slightly less flavored and just do a great job of compression limiting or what it is that I want to get to deal with an attack or a function or an input. If you want something that has a certain flavor, then of course we've got some fabulous plugins to choose from. I won't dive into all of those in this, but we can answer some questions about it. But as you see, I'm kind of running through these in my processing window. As I go through the window here, I now have an insert B after that functionality. I happen to drop in a Dyne 8 just for this example. So I had an insert before the PEQ and the comp, which, by the way, if I want to, I can go into options. And if I choose channel options here, I can actually choose, hey, do I want my parametric EQ first or do I want my comp first? And then you can do that by an individual channel, or you can set the desk up for your preference globally. So whatever you think is the best way to go on that. I'll jump back out of that. I've used that insert ahead of time, and then afterwards I've got another insert that I've got. You can use these inserts if you wish to. You can route them via the I/O section, and if you had a gig where somebody says, hey, my talent has to have my blah, blah, blah tube preamp because it's how they get their tone, then you can insert that for them on whatever channel they require it, or on an output section or anything that you'd want. You'll do great with it. But what I like to use is the Dyne 8, which is our answer to multi-band compression and dynamic EQ in one plug. Now, some of you guys have used some competitive products. As I said, we play well with others. We have a Waves card, and if you wish to run Waves products in our system, absolutely, hats off to you. I like the sound of our processing. I love what we've created, and fortunately, ours run as deep plugins on the FPGA and add absolutely no latency, and everything is phase coherent in what you've put together. So as an example, if you do the effects upgrade on an Avantis, you can run up to 16 instances of a Dyne 8, and you can pop them in anywhere you want. So you could have them on inputs, or you can have them on outputs. You could put them on, you know, if you wanted to use it for an IEM fix on a monitor output, or if you want to have a multi-band compressor and adaptive EQ on your main outputs, they're all assignable wherever you'd like them. This is what it looks like for you. We've got a multi-band 4-band EQ, four-band compressor and adaptive EQ. I won't do a deep dive on this. I think that'll be another webinar for us, but great stuff and easy to use. The reason I'm showing you all this in the processing window is this is one way to get to it. The last button here is we have individual input delay. So if you have to assign something in so that it's, maybe you've got to align something to a video feed, or say you're a rocket scientist mix guy and you want to time align everything on the input on every mic on the stage to the snare drum. Awesome. Great. Go for it. We'll give you the tools. Far above what I have the time for, but you can do it. The other part is, as I look for a visual here, Shawn, is this clear enough that we can actually see monitoring? If I grab I'll take one in the center here. We have a preamp section I can jump into and out of. If we jump back out of that, I can jump right into the gate for that individual channel if I want. I don't have to be selected on that channel. If I close that out and I wanted to be able to get to a different gate, and I go, oh no, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to actually work on the snare, the bottom snare mic. I gated it. I can jump right into that. I don't even have to select the channel. If I choose to select the channel, it's done on the screen here. As you'll see, we don't have the green row of buttons in this new continuity user interface. So we just use what's on the screen. But the idea is that we don't have to select a channel before we jump into whatever it is we want to work with the processing. These flat lines that I have all across here, that's my 4-band parametric EQ. I can jump in there, do anything that I want with it, and I can very quickly jump in and out of it. If I want to, I could copy that as an example. I'm going to use the copy function. I'm copying that EQ, and I actually want to paste that because I had it on another tom, and I want them to sound about the same, and I've only got a couple of seconds. Away I go. There, I've got something on it. So easy tools to use, and as we go down the line in the continuity UI with these new 15-inch plus touchscreens, I can jump into the EQ, or I can hit the compressor right there. I've got everything that I want. My library functionality is here. If I wanted to bring up an opto compressor, it's that quick. I can compress it in. As you can see, I also have my histogram, which is kind of a preview of what's going on for you, for what's going to happen. Maybe before I engage that compressor or bring that signal up, you can see how hard you're hitting it. The other thing that's kind of neat, and is sort of proof of how we process differently, if I turn that off, notice the histogram is still doing all the math. With this FPGA, we've got so much math headroom that's available that it actually allows us to always do the processing no matter what, whether it's engaged or not. It doesn't add any latency. It doesn't do anything to the affected signal. It's always there, and I can kick it in and doesn't tax anything. You will not be able to run out of processing capability on this console. You could load every input, every output, use every possible processing application everywhere you can put them, and it will still have headroom for you. So that's one way of getting it across on the processing. As we go down the strip, you can grab it here as well, and those will give you the things you need to. So we've talked about I/O, we talked about processing. Now, as I said, we don't have patching, But when we get something in, we've used IO, but we may need to be able to route it, right? That's my British pronunciation of routing, right? That's the routing button. So, or as a friend of mine calls it, the big fat routing button. The routing button will give you functionality for anything from any direction, meaning if I select a channel like the kick drum and I want to see where it's assigned in, this will tell me it's assigned into matrix 1, matrix 2, however I've got it set up. These are on in settings and they're either pre or post. So I have it assigned into some wedges. Because the wedges are monitors, we have it pre. On some of the other functionality, you'll see that it's pink, and that means that it's post. You'll also see level meters here as I choose to see if I have it set up. I've got something in here. Let's see if I could turn this up a little bit farther. So I have it set up to my main mix, and you can see the level here as you can see the meter come up and down. You can see easily if that selected channel, which I've touched the screen for, is assigned into any of the DCAs as well, and then you can see what your input direct out level is on it. Now that's on input routing. By the magic of my layout capability, I also took the other screen and I laid it out on layer F on this same one, which looks like that. So if I wanted to go back in and I want to grab something on, let's say, stereo mains on the output section, and I want to see what's routed into the output. Note when I'm on an output section, everything runs left to right before we were going horizontally. So regardless of which routing function you're in, you can easily determine whether you're on an input strip or on an output section. So simple stuff. This tells me what's assigned in and what the levels are to my left, right. And if I wanted to, we can do the same thing with a matrix as an example if I have anything assigned in. I don't remember what I patched into this. It looks like I've got it just signed as the output. I've got a main assigned into that matrix, and I'm going to use that as an aux fill, or I want to put that into a delay stack, or I want to have something, whatever that would look like. Yes, the first question I usually get from everybody is, well, what can you assign into matrices? Anything that I have on the console, I can assign into a matrix. So if what you really want to do is use a mix of aux sends, or if you want to use a mix of groups, or if you want to be able to send something from other parts of the master section of the console, which we sort of grew up knowing that was matrices. But we've also added in DLive, our last 2 firmware updates ago, we decided, yeah, we too will allow you to assign an input to a matrix, and we've done the same thing here if you wish. So pretty easy to do. You just go to whatever that is for selectability. Frankly, the fastest way to do it is the other way, but I can go back to whatever I want and just keep going until I get to what it is here that I want in the strip. Or I would go back and I would jump back out of this, go to my bank, hit drums, and I can assign that in from routing here as well. So easy stuff. So as I'm showing you inputs and outputs, that covers a bit about routing. We have meter capability. We have phenomenal scene capability. We've covered setup. Utility is one of the functions that you need for just a couple of things for managing show files and settings. I want to cover that before I forget to. It should have been maybe at the front side of the webinar, so thanks for your patience. When we set anything up on this console, the first thing that I recommend is that you save it as a scene. And then inside, after saving the scene, I want you to save the show file, okay? So the show file itself is the wrapper that we use to store everything that's in the console. A scene gives you sort of, the individual information for what you've got assigned and where you want things to be. There's a lot to what we can do with the scenes, but it's simply put, if I bring up scenes, I have 500 of them that are available. And if anybody needs to see it, there you go. 500 scenes that are available. They are easily and instantly recallable. We have some cool stuff. We've got a description on each one that you can actually put a few notes into if you're doing a production where you need to follow a libretto or a script. That can be really helpful if you're looking for a cue line or a character's note or something, or somebody entering or some blocking. You can note about that. And that can be your go. There is something that we've included on this, which is very similar. It's taken from DLive, and that is for a scene only. Let me make sure that I'm paused there. This only works on scenes. We have an undo function, okay? So for grins, if I wanted to, I could grab another one of these. I'm currently on TC webinar here. If I wanted to grab my lefty scene, which I'll cover in a moment, and I can hit go, and it says, yes, I've got it set up so that it has to have a verification before it goes. You can remove that with options, as we've done before. You can set it up how you prefer. But the idea is that I have this and I can just hit go, and whatever I want to write into the scene is designed in. Okay, so I don't know if Shawn can show you this real quickly, but what I've done is I've actually set the entire console up by default after that scene. Shawn, can you cut back to the outshot of this so that they can see that I've just recalled a scene that set this up as a left-handed console, okay? I happen to be left-handed and I feel oppressed occasionally that I walk up and everybody tells my DCAs have to be on the right. Well, that's okay. But a couple of the TC guys will make fun of me for it because they're pros, but they're like, okay, whatever, dude, you can set it up how you want, but you better make sure that I have a scene in it that I could set it up back the other way. And I'm like, okay, great. So I'd go back into TC webinar and I'd hit go and I'd say, yeah. And then it completely configures the console without interrupting audio to work the opposite direction. Okay. So there's a lot that we can do with that. Maybe we can cover a little bit of that if we've got time towards the end. How are we doing for time?
We're at 4:46 right now.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to cover a couple of things, and then we're going to just take questions. Have we got some questions piling up?
We do have some questions piling up. We've been answering some via chat, and you've been answering some if you've been going on. So.
Okay, good. All right, this is working the way it's supposed to. Thanks, everybody. I hope you were enjoying it. As we covered all of that stuff on there, we talked a little bit about scenes and setup. I think a couple other features just to touch on for you that I think are super vital. Cool capabilities in the mix on this. One of the things that we offer is DCA spills that can be enabled in the setup for the desk itself. If you haven't worked with DCA spills, lots of people have them at this time. But what you can do is, if I've got these items set up into a drum mix where I've got everything there, and rather than have to go to the layer or wherever I laid those drums out, I can literally just mix from the DCA side and I can enable or disable the DCA spill function. So that's built in. Another cool function that we have is ganging. Ganging allows you the opportunity, I think I set up gang 8. We will allow you to, when you're setting the console up, if you want to make inputs adjacent pairs, if you want to make them stereo inputs, you can do that. But in most of my shows, very rarely do I have the prep to know ahead of time that somebody's going to walk up with an extra keyboard player at the last moment or literally on the break and go, oh, by the way, so-and-so is going to sit in. I need you to hook up a stereo DI for the keyboard. Okay, great. I have input 17 and 63 available. But with ganging, what I can do is I could literally go in and find a new ganging group, and I could say, okay, I want to go to input 17. I'm going to choose 17, and I'm going to say, oh, sorry, this is already part of something. I used bad channels. Let's go higher. I'll jump out of that. I'm going to use input 31 and 64. And I'm going to say, all right, or 31 and 59. Let's use two odd numbers. And I can actually apply those together and make them a stereo pair. In addition to making it a stereo pair, we can decide what functionality do we want to give those. Now, if it's a keyboard, I just want the fader to turn everything up. I don't care if the preamp channels are tracking together. That's perfect. That's what I'd want. That's great. Maybe I'll have all the attributes apply. But in an application where you want to add more things into a gang than one stereo keyboard, here's an application, choir mics. The guys at TC are total pros at this stuff, right? They're micing choirs all the time. I'm a hack, but I still understand the theory. But I really have had scenarios where I've got 10 minutes to set up 4 or 8 mics for a choir. And I just want to make sure that I can get them all to work. I want to make sure that if I have a sound check, I just want the EQs on all of the mics to work together. I could gang on 4 mics. I could have the EQs all work together from one set, one control. I can grab any one of those 4 microphones that I'd insert into a gang, and I could have that control. Sometimes, if I do have the time to tweak it all together, I may want the faders to work together, but I'll use independent gains, I'll use different EQs, but I may want the compressors to all tie together so that regardless of what the levels are, I could actually tie those compressor thresholds together so that they all kick into compression at the same time so you don't end up with any image shift. So that's kind of propeller heady spinning kind of stuff, but a lot of, as I like to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So overview here covered, a couple of fun things just to answer, and then we'll answer a couple questions. Covered the recall functionality. I do want to show you a couple of quick functions for some of the rotaries and some of the things that we have with the interface that I have here. This will work for gain functionality. Whatever I'd have it here, this becomes gain. If I select to the right here, pan, then this rotary becomes panning for any of the channels I grab quick and fast. And then I've got 3 presets. I've set number 1 up for my own choice. I prefer to have that be the EQ. So I've got 3 bands for the low frequency parametric, low mid, and highs here. Now that is the same thing that I would have if I bring this up, but this gives me what I want to be able to work with if I'm playing around with some of that stuff and I'm like, okay, hey, I want to grab that and I want to do a cut, but I want to change the cue. I've got rotary knobs for it. In addition to that, I've also got a setting, if I close out of that, and if you can see at the bottom here, this gives me my gate, threshold, depth, attack, hold, and release. And next to it, I have the compressor output threshold ratio, gain, attack, and release on these orange settings, and that would be for whatever channel I choose. So that'll give you individual selectivity for that as well. Shawn, do you want to see if we can jump to a few questions?
Yes. So one of the questions that came up is what are the alternate pan modes? So bus configuration, left, center, right, left, right. Like what are our options on there?
Oh, okay. So we've got left, right, or you've got left, center, right as you want to be able to set it up. And that will pan things from the left bus to center or right bus to center as it would work. I don't have anything more elaborate where it gets some crazy esoteric, pan something by 30% to here or to there. But if it's something you're asking for better support or a longer answer than that, if you want to talk about specific details, our tech support team includes live humans. We answer the phone and we answer email. You are welcome to reach out to support@americanmusicandsound.com. If you have a relationship with a local dealer or a local rep, by all means, tell them that you saw me on the webinar and I said that I promised that you would get an answer to your question. They just need to reach out. Now, if you're somewhere else outside of the United States, Allen Heath's distribution team has worldwide support for the same answers. We're happy to do that for you. If you're not sure who to talk to, you can reach out to anybody for Allen Heath, and we'll all support each other globally. Okay?
I don't know if you answered this one, but can we play multi-track files from a thumb drive, or is that just 2-track, or what do we?
No, that's a great question, and I did not answer that yet. I did talk about that we can record or play back 2-track files to and from a thumb drive that are 2496 only. However, if you want multi-track playback, we treat this like we do a touring console. We're looking for a different input source. If you're really doing multi-track recording, you want to have an output mechanism that's a card. That could be either Dante or if you prefer Waves, whatever works great for you. And that could be both your output via either Waves or Dante, or also your virtual sound check return. So you could use that as your input source from tracks as well.
Can we hook this console up to other Allen and Heath products?
Oh, yes. As I said, it would connect to everything in our Everything I/O world. That also includes connecting an S-Link port to a Giga Ace or to another S-Link port on either SQ or D-Live or another Avantis. And if you'd like more details about that, there's a couple of YouTube videos out there. And if you'd like to have specific answers for your questions, once again, just reach back to us. Be happy to spend some time with you on it.
I also got one, why is Pat such a badass bass player? I mean, I said it was because you were a lefty. So.
That's my brother. I just want to thank my brother for watching today. It's really cool to have you on. Thank you.
I think that's the ones that we've, some of the ones that I picked out on here.
Okay, cool.
There were a lot of questions that I think we might need to do some follow-up with some people. And one just came in. Well, do you know if Avantis will ever support DAW control, like SQ or something like that?
Good question. We do have some MIDI functionality that is being developed for it, but I don't have an exact answer to how that will work for DAW control at this time. But to share with you, we listen intently to anyone's requests. The user groups are something that we monitor as a manufacturer regularly. So, it could be in Facebook or whatever you want, not just our authorized ones. But whether it's for Avantis or if it's for SQ or D-Live, our teams take that to heart. So when people are asking questions about that, we're happy to make sure that we can get back with you when we have it available. We don't always address the timeline, but we're always listening. So that's the best answer I can give right now. I'm not certain at this time about DAW control, but stay tuned on that. It's a good question.
One last one that came in before we shut off the questions. We have a friend on the East Coast here asking, can AudioMix be a traditional gate-based or a gain-sharing auto mixer?
Thank you very much, because I didn't go through the auto mixer yet. It can be either a gain sharing style, which some people look at as like what we call our D classic, which is the algorithm we've written. It's a Dugan style, if you know that or you're familiar with that, or it could be an NOM attenuation on it.
Awesome. I think that's what we've got for now. We're going to kind of put a pause on here and regroup, let you get a drink of water before we do our rinse, wash, repeat round. So
right.
I thank everyone for joining us. And if you have any other questions, you can email us. I'll probably give you our email. Since I'm the guy with the red beard, you can email us at redbeard@audiobiz.com, and I will get that to the appropriate people, and we'll go on from there. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.